Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we are going to take a look at another Mattel figure. This is a brand new Mattel figure, as this is one of the newest wave of Savage Strikes to hit Target and potentially at some point in the future Walmart, as they've kind of had the pegs out for quite some time but just haven't actually put the figures out. But this is obviously the Plesiosaurus. You can see it has some really nice Camp Cretaceous packaging. Definitely the figure that I was the most excited about, I would say, as far as these newest Savage Strike figures go, because we've only had two Plesiosaur figures before, and they had very similar paint schemes, so I was really quite happy to see this one having such a different look to it as far as the paint scheme goes. But again, you have your standard Camp Cretaceous packaging, and then here on the back we have an image that shows, of course, part of the action feature of the Plesiosaur. We also have one of these like random little art books that are included, and then an image down here showing the other figures that are in this wave of Savage Strike. So let's go ahead, break this open, and take a look at the newest version of the Plesiosaurus. So here is our new Plesiosaurus, if we can get our camera to actually look at it correctly. But you can see again a really cool look for it in comparison to some of the previous Plesiosaur figures, as the previous ones have all been fairly light in coloration with kind of like a design that comes down off of the back and the head. This one, however, is primarily a nice dark blue, but then you can see it has kind of like a light gray underbelly, which is really nice looking. Again, definitely a very realistic coloration as far as the appearance goes. Definitely something that you could have potentially seen on a Plesiosaur, as most marine animals usually have that light underbelly, darker upper side to kind of help it with camouflage and things like that. But again, the figure looks really cool, so let's go ahead and get a closer look at it right now. So as far as the actual sculpt goes, we don't really need to take a look at the sculpt because we have reviewed the sculpt of this Plesiosaurus numerous times at this point, so this time we only really need to take a look at what's new with the figure, and that would be the coloration. So up here on the head, you can see that if my camera would again focus on it, you can see that the eyes are painted with a yellow and actually given a black pupil, and I really like that aspect because previously a lot of Mattel figures, instead of like the black pupil, would just kind of give it the same coloration there. Like in this case, you would see this dark blue, well, the pupil would be just the dark blue, so they would basically just apply the yellow paint and then leave out the pupil, and then that dark blue would take care of the pupil in the background there. However, they have actually applied a black pupil to this figure, so in my opinion that is definitely a plus, much better than what they were doing previously. You can also see the teeth are painted with like a bit of an off-white, maybe like heading toward a yellow coloration. Very nice, very realistic tones of color, I would say, as far as like the teeth go on a Plesiosaur. You can also see the inside of the mouth has the tongue painted out in there. Very nicely glossed as well, which you can see as we turn it. You can kind of see it shining in the light a little bit, sort of. You can see the inside of the mouth. On the upper side, however, actually in the throat area, it does have some paint back there, even on like those kind of skin flaps there on the side of the mouth. But if you look at the upper jaw, it does not have any type of paint other than that dark blue. Of course, you can also tell that we do have articulation in the jaw right there. But then as we start to move back into the body, you can continue to see how we have that very nice variation of like that light gray on the underside and then that dark blue on the upper side, and that continues down through the course of the Plesiosaur, and it looks really nice. I like how, again, the tones of color that they've chosen are very realistic as far as what could have potentially been the coloration of a Plesiosaur. You can also see a few areas of like a very light blue, just real tiny little spots, almost like the speckling that we normally see on the Mattel figures. Like you can see it right here in the shoulder area. You can see again a few speckles of like that light blue. But then once we flip the figure over, we can now see again the dark blue primarily runs the course of the tail and the flippers and everything here on the underside, but then you can see it transition back to that kind of light gray here on the underbelly of the Plesiosaur, and you can of course see the Jurassic Facts app right there if you are interested in adding this to your collection. But other than that, it doesn't really seem like there's any paintwork at all to the figure. Really nice what we do have, but there's just not too much to it. Like pretty much usual as far as a Mattel figure goes. I'd say it's about the standard when it comes to the paint schemes of a Mattel figure, but I actually really quite like this one again because it's so different than the previous versions. It's a bit of a breath of fresh air for the Plesiosaur. As far as a size goes, for a length from the tail there to the head, you are looking at about 6 3/4 inches or around the 17.5 centimeter range. And then for a height, if you kind of stand it up like this, it's again dependent on how you position the head, the neck, and everything, but you can see it's about 2 3/4 inches or about 7 centimeters when it's kind of sitting in that position. As far as articulation goes on the figure, you can see we do have quite a bit of that as usual, but I think it's just the same standard articulation we've had each time for the Plesiosaur. So we do have the articulated jaw, and then we can move the neck right here, which does allow for some nice posability, and it's actually on a swivel, so you can swivel it around, which really does allow quite a bit of nice posability there. And then you have the area down here, which again continues to give you quite a bit of movement in the neck region of the Plesiosaur. And then we have articulation in the flippers, but that's also part of the action feature. So once you press the action feature, the flippers kind of flap and flop through the water, so that's really cool as well. And then we also have articulation back here in the tail, which can go up or down. So some really nice articulation, pretty much the type of articulation you would expect to see for a Plesiosaurus. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, and Robert Muldoon from the Mattel Jurassic World toy line, next to our newest Savage Strike Plesiosaurus, and you can definitely see again around the size of the figure in comparison to these others here, especially with the Colovosaurus. You could see that it's generally a similar size to like an Attack Pack size figure overall. Definitely very nicely sized, though, I will say, for a Plesiosaurus. So this newest version, the newest release of the Mattel Jurassic World Plesiosaurus, is definitely a very nice addition to the Jurassic World line. Again, with the newest wave of Savage Strikes, you don't have any type of like crazy new really cool species included. It's all just kind of repaints of previous figures. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, especially when you're like me and you love to have alternate color schemes of figures that you already have. And the Plesiosaurus is one that I welcome with open arms because it's one that hasn't had too many releases so far as the Mattel line goes, and especially with this one because it has such a different look in comparison to the previous paint schemes that we've had with the Plesiosaurus. I really quite like this one, potentially even more than the previous ones. It's a tough call. It's just hard to tell exactly who I like the most as far as the paint scheme goes, but I think I really do quite like this one, potentially more than the previous versions, but I really do again like the fact that we've used some really nice realistic tones of color for what you would potentially see on a Plesiosaurus, and I also like the fact that they stick with the kind of light underbelly, darker upper side, which is a very realistic aspect of a marine animal. The paint application is all really nicely applied throughout the entire figure. It's all naturally applied. Nothing on it really looks like paint as opposed to body color, and they've done a great job in areas like the face where there's like a lot of room for error, I will say, with like the teeth. The teeth could definitely get very sloppy as far as the paintwork goes, but what we do have here, it's really nicely placed. There's no sloppiness as far as that goes. The tongue on the inside of the mouth is nicely placed. The eyes are really beautifully placed, and that's one area that is always a concern of mine when it comes to a Mattel figure, because we have had quite a bit of quality control issues in the past as far as like the placement of the eyes, and I really am happy to see that they've used a black pupil on this Plesiosaur when they could have easily just allowed that darker blue in the background there to kind of overtake the pupil area, but they actually went ahead and gave it a black pupil, and that is definitely a plus in comparison to a lot of the previous Mattel figures. Of course, as far as the sculpt goes, the sculpt is beautifully done, very nice, very realistic, and loaded with detail, as always when it comes to a Mattel sculpt. They never cease to amaze me when it comes to the sculpts of their figures, and when you have a figure that's beautiful like this, sculpt-wise, with really nice paintwork, it's always the extra added plus when you get some really nice articulation, and that's exactly what you have with this Plesiosaurus, which all of the articulation is really smooth, works perfectly, exactly like it should, and then you even have a very cool action feature, which is basically the Plesiosaurus swimming along. So, as far as this figure goes, another really awesome release from Mattel, and definitely something that I am quite happy about. So if you would like to pick this up, make sure you check your local Target, or of course Walmart if they ever actually get around to stocking the figures, because they should start to become quite abundant throughout the Walmart and Target stores. And make sure you also like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.